I think
So yeah,
Julie
let's get
Upton
started.
is here. Julie, did we get you?
Nope. Hi, everyone. I'm also new faculty in the Department in Health and Exercise Science.
Um, let's get started. So I'm Randy Hughes, and I'm a professor in the Department of Biology, and I'm Dean of the Graduate College. And I've been here since 2001. I've loved it here at OU, and it's always fun to see new faculty. And some of you, as you said, have already been here for a little while, but those of you that are new to campus this fall, and really all of you, welcome. I know these are kind of strange and maybe stressful times to be joining the faculty, but I hope you're finding some good ways to get settled in and get plugged into the OU community, and particularly those of you who've moved to Norman very recently. So welcome this morning. I think today we wanted to take this hour and just give you an overview of what the Graduate College is, what we do. We're kind of behind the scenes a lot of the time, and so it's nice to be able to take a moment and really explain kind of what the Graduate College is about. Our mission, and I think Liz, you're controlling our slides. Is it working? I just have a white screen, so I'm just checking to see if anybody can see anything.
Is anyone seeing the shared screen? Okay.
It was up a few minutes ago, and we could see it then.
Again.
If you can't get it going, I can try on this end. We're recreating the experience of teaching on Zoom.
There you go.
There, I see it. Awesome. Yeah, so this is a slide I wanted. So our mission, as it says here, is to guide and support and enhance the educational experience for every graduate student at the university. The Graduate College, we're a campus-wide college, and we help to oversee a single campus-wide graduate faculty. And then each of you as graduate faculty have appointments in your respective academic colleges and departments. Graduate College governs the formation and changes in graduate programs. It manages the university-wide policies for graduate education. We serve as the Office of Record for graduate faculty appointments and graduation milestones, things like general exams and things like that. We process graduate admissions and clear students for graduation, and provide support for graduate students and faculty. There are a couple other terms you may hear about today that I wanted to just give a brief introduction about as well. One of these is the Graduate Council, and also what the graduate faculty means. The Graduate Council is the representative body or the instrument of the graduate faculty. It exercises the general legislative and academic authority of the graduate faculty, which are to establish policies and standards governing development and changes in graduate curricula, including new courses and degree programs. The graduate faculty, through the Graduate Council, makes recommendations on all proposals for new graduate programs and substantially modified ones or deletions of graduate programs, monitors graduate course offerings. It also determines the standards of eligibility for students for admission, financial aid, and graduation. And as Graduate Dean, I serve as the Chief University-wide Officer for Graduate Studies and Research. My responsibilities include coordinating graduate programs among respective academic units, serving as the presiding officer of the university-wide graduate faculty. And Liz is jumping ahead here. Can you go back? Thanks. And the Graduate Council, and running the administrative office that's supporting graduate education. You can see here, and all these folks will introduce themselves more in a moment, but in addition to me, we have Sherry Irvin, who is the Senior Associate Dean of the Graduate College and has been with us now for a couple of years. Liz Carr is Associate Dean and started with this summer. And Rodney Bates is the Director of, and I just lost my slides again, Liz. Are they still up?
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. And Rodney is the Director of Graduate Student and Postdoc Retention and Support. And we have additional individuals who aren't here today that lead our information services, the graduate councils, graduate admissions, and other areas of the graduate college, which we'll be talking about more in a moment. Liz, can you move to the next slide? The graduate college really is subdivided or has 5 sub-organizations within it. Basically, the first is graduate admissions. We have, like a lot of universities, a distributed admissions model where it's both central and distributed. So when a student first applies to OU, their materials come in through the graduate college, through graduate admissions. We process the transcript, transfer work, things like that. And then those files are sent to the individual academic units, which make recommendations back to the graduate college about whether or not to admit those students. And then finally, on my behalf as Dean of the Graduate College, graduate admissions then makes the actual admissions recommendations, offers of admission to those students. We also have an academic services group. These are the folks that we call mostly the graduate counselors. And these folks manage student files. A lot of the student records are in a system called Banner, which is their course grades. But everything else at the graduate level is largely housed within the graduate college. So the makeup of their graduate committee, the specific courses that they've chosen to fulfill the degree requirements, the record of that, the record of their completion of graduate milestones and things like that. And also the administration of all the policies and procedures that pertain to those things. Most of that is run by the academic services group of people. We also have graduate student life. This is an area that Rodney manages. And this is a source of community. It provides support. It provides professional development opportunities for graduate students across campus. This is really intended to be the home away from the academic home for graduate students on campus. We also have the Office of English Training and Certification Services. We are required by state law to certify the English competency of every instructor at the University of Oklahoma. And for graduate students, and even for some faculty, this is done through ETCS. And this office also provides support for our English second language students and international students that need additional support. And then finally, we have a new Office of Postdoctoral Affairs, which we are working to bring online. And this will provide many of the same supports that we do for graduate students, but for postdoctoral scholars who right now are really don't have much of a centralized support or a sense of community at OU. Liz, next slide, please. So I mentioned it within academic services, we have a group of people. Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead a slide here. In addition to the folks that we have within the graduate college, we have a number of people within academic units that support these functions. And one role is the graduate liaisons. These are members of the graduate faculty, and their function really is to serve as a bridge between what the graduate college is doing and what's happening in the academic units. So for a lot of the individual forms that graduate students submit, the graduate liaison needs to sign off as well. And that's a way for us to ensure that the department is aware of the graduate milestones that are occurring within the department, but it's also a good conduit for us to deal with any issues that come up with these student records and milestones. Because of their role and their familiarity with all of the policies and procedures related to graduate education, the graduate liaisons also can help to advise students on specific timelines and milestones. They advise students on program-specific coursework. And really, our graduate liaisons also serve as kind of problem fixers and support mechanisms for students. In many departments, they are also named as the Director of Graduate Studies or something like that. And they're often the go-to person for many graduate students in the department for issues that may come up. In addition to this, many units also have graduate administrators. These are members of the staff. They're really important people, so treat them nicely. And they often work very closely with students, advising them on specific coursework that they need to fulfill their degrees, how to do the various paperwork pieces that they need to do to get through steps towards graduation, advising students on which coursework to take. In many departments, these are often the first point of contact for our graduate students in terms of their initial coursework and studies. Next slide, please. Within the Graduate College, we have a team of people that we call the Graduate College Academic Counselors. Right now, we have 7 counselors. We've got searches ongoing to fill 2 open positions to get that to 9. Each of the counselors represents a subset of the departments and colleges across the university. And these are really the point people for departments for answering questions about various forms, graduate college deadlines, the standards for graduation, and for handling things like formatting and submission of master's theses and doctoral dissertations. We have 2 forms that I'll introduce now that are important for us to track the individualized programs that students have toward their degree. Every graduate program has OU Regents and State Regents approved requirements. But in addition to that, there are courses and requirements that individual graduate committees will set up with each individual student. And we record those through what's called the program of study at the master's level or the advisory conference report at the doctoral level, which is our official record basically of what that coursework is, what the makeup of that student's committee is that they need to fulfill for graduation. And so the graduate counselors are the folks that keep those records and work closely with departments on making sure that all of that is in line with the Regents' approved degree program standards and other university policies and standards. These are also the individuals that work to make sure that students have completed all the major milestones that they need to complete to receive the degrees and then clear them for graduation. So a lot of the contacts that occur back and forth between graduate liaisons on the department level or graduate administrators on the department level and the graduate college occur post-admissions with these graduate counselors. I and the associate deans and others meet with them every week and discuss individual student cases that come up. And then often when they're interacting with the department, that their interactions with you have been informed by those discussions. Okay, next slide, please. And then finally, before I turn this over to Sherry as our next speaker, I wanted to take just a minute to talk about what the graduate faculty are. All of you that have faculty appointments have basically an instructional or research appointment within an academic unit. But then in addition to that, there are graduate faculty appointments that are housed within the graduate college. So these 2 things often go together, but they're not the same thing. And these graduate faculty appointments outline what graduate faculty privileges each individual has. These include the authority to teach graduate level classes or to serve on or chair master's or doctoral committees. And there are a number of and so those different privileges are granted by units or the graduate college to a faculty member based on what their role is in the department and their level of background and experience. Most tenure track and rank renewal term faculty are typically appointed with all of these privileges, but that's not always the case. It depends on the particular circumstances. And there are 3 classes of graduate faculty. The first, which we call the regular graduate faculty members. These can be tenured faculty, tenure track, or rank renewable term. And departments make these appointments through graduate faculty criteria that are approved by the graduate college, but set by the department. And then they communicate those appointments to the graduate college. Those have to be renewed at least once every 7 years. And those are put in categories which are listed here. We're changing this over. There used to be a different set of these. So you may hear about things, categories called M0, M1, M2, M3. Those are still in effect, but we're phasing those out, and those are being replaced by the ones that are listed here, which range from RM0 to RM4. So that stands for regular member of the graduate faculty, and then the specific privileges that are associated with that appointment depend on which level of RM status is given by the department. Most of this you may never really see. It's managed by the department kind of behind the scenes, and is done based on the department's criteria. But just so you know about this, if this ever comes up. A second major class of graduate faculty appointments are what we call special membership. This includes other members of OU faculty and staff that are non-regular faculty, so not tenured, tenure track, rank renewable term, so instructors and lecturers. It may include postdocs or research scientists on campus. It can also include individuals who are not OU employees, but either have an affiliation with OU, or somebody that a member that a graduate student and their major advisor might want to bring in some additional expertise, somebody outside of the university. And so these appointments are called special membership appointments. They can have all the same privileges that I've listed above for regular graduate faculty, but these are individuals who are nominated by the department and then approved by me as the graduate dean. And there are certain restrictions to what special members can do, but other than that, they're members of the graduate faculty. There's finally a class of graduate faculty called members at large, which are nominated by the graduate dean and approved by the graduate council. But in other respects, they're very much like the special membership status of faculty. So with that, let me stop there and just see if there are any questions that folks have so far about the first few slides I presented before I turn this over to Sherry. Okay, well, if there's not, let me turn this over now to Sherry Irvin, Senior Associate Dean in the Graduate College.
Hi, it's great to be here. Great to see all the new faculty. Before I kind of talk about just a few things, I wanted to give Rodney Bates, I think Rodney is still here, the opportunity to introduce himself, say a little bit about what he does, and then take off because he is officially off today, just visiting from out of town. So Rodney, let me turn it over to you for a minute.
Thank you, Sherry and Randy. My name is Rodney Bates. For those that don't know me, this is kind of my permanent voice. I had surgery on my vocal cords, so I just naturally sound raspy, and then air conditioned today, so it's even worse in my hotel room. So I serve as director of graduate studies, graduate student life. And as Randy mentioned, we do a lot of programming support for graduate students and also for postdoctoral scholars, which now we're developing an office for that. But we do programming around 4 main areas: retention and support programs, academic research and professor programs, professional development, and community engagement. This model is to serve to cover a more holistic way of supporting graduate students through their journey and their academic journey. We want to make sure that if they are here, that they're getting the resources to either enhance their academic journey, to supplement their social community engagement, and to prepare them for the academic or industry, if they decide to go into the industry. Along with that, I also work with academic life coaching. If there are students that are having some barriers that are preventing them from degree completion, there are times that I can offer academic life coaching. I also do a lot of work within the graduate college, focusing on diversity and inclusion, as that is an important key part for students from marginalized background, to give them support in the midst of their journey. And then last but not least, also working on some graduate study research along with Sherry and Liz as we also try to find some educational components around what are barriers for graduate students and try to make sure that we can get information out so we can provide, so we can provide them a better better degree completion, better pathway to degree completion. Okay, so that's all that I will be saying, and nice to meet you all. I'm gonna get out of here and go do what I need to do. So nice to meet you all.
Bye, Rodney. Yeah, Rodney is a great resource in supporting our graduate students, also supporting graduate student organizations. Particularly, we've got a few organizations that focus on, there's a STEM Inclusion Council, there's a Social Sciences and Humanities Inclusion Council, and then there are some graduate student affinity groups, including the Black Graduate Student Association, and I think we may have a list of those in a slide later, but Rodney helps to coordinate those and help them develop a sustainable infrastructure, since the turnover of grad students, especially in master's programs, is sometimes high. So again, I'm Sherry Irvin. I'm the Senior Associate Dean. I've been with the Grad College for 2 years, as Randy mentioned, and I was the only Associate Dean until July. And so for that reason, I've worked with programs, every graduate program on the Norman campus, except for law, which does not fall under our purview. And so you're always welcome to get in touch with me if you have some kind of a complicated graduate student situation, or with Liz, that you'd like to discuss. We've been working on, at OU, in some academic units, there is a culture, or has tended to be a culture, where the graduate committee isn't necessarily as involved as we would like to see throughout the students' research progress. And so we're trying to establish a culture and some policies that will support greater levels of involvement of the graduate committee throughout the students' work. And so one of the best practices that we recommend is that if you're serving on, and this is especially true for doctoral committees, but also for master's thesis committees, that there be an agreement as early as possible about who is going to play which roles on the committee. The idea that all the members of the committee are going to see the students' work, give feedback on the students' work. And the possible exception is the graduate college representative who comes from a different academic unit. Maybe that person is not going to give substantive content-oriented feedback on the students' work, but that person should be involved in the whole process, know what's going on, be in the loop about the process. So early on, there needs to be agreement about which roles, which committee members are going to play, when they're going to get the students' work, when they're going to give feedback. And there needs to be an establishment of timelines that allow for thorough review of the students' work. And we're working in the Graduate College on establishing some policies and timelines for the final semester when students are actually submitting and defending their thesis or dissertation. Right now, our policies on that are quite minimal. And we see situations sometimes where students submit their work to the committee very, very late. And we're trying to shift the expectations as early as possible in the process so that everybody's on the same page that the committee needs to be involved in reviewing that work. So we can go to the next slide, Liz. So the Graduate College representative is a very specific and important role on the doctoral committee. And this is a person who is outside the academic unit that the student and most of the committee members are in, and doesn't have any kind of conflict of interest with anybody on the committee or with the student. So you see that in the last bullet there. Because that person has a couple of key roles. One of them is to make sure that the rights and interests of the student are safeguarded, and also to ensure that the policies and standards of the Graduate College are maintained. Now, that person might also have content area expertise. Often grad college representatives are selected because they have some kind of relevant expertise. So they might also be involved in evaluating the content of the student's work and giving feedback, but that's not necessary to that role. So that needs to be established early on. If you're the grad college representative on someone's committee, you should work with the rest of the committee to establish early on, are you going to be giving content-based feedback, or are you going to have mainly a sort of procedural oversight role? But the graduate college representative has a responsibility to report any violations of policy and procedure to the grad college. And I would say more generally, if you have a concern about something that's happening on a committee where you're serving as the grad college representative or as any other member, you're always welcome to reach out to us. But we really especially entrust with our grad college representatives the responsibility to get in touch with us if they have any concerns about what's going on the committee. The grad college representatives should be present at all committee meetings and milestone events. So they have to be there for the general exam oral defense. They have to be there for the final defense, but any meeting that the committee is having to evaluate the student's work, the graduate college representative should really be involved in that as a full member of that committee. And there are some policies about this in the grad college bulletin, as we have on the slide there. Okay, next slide, Liz. And I'm just going to talk about one more aspect of what we're doing in the grad college. I am the diversity liaison for the graduate college, and Rodney and I have been working closely on diversity initiatives in the graduate college. And one thing that we're working on is in concert with the Office of the Provost and the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, we're working on a training for faculty on best practices and inclusive admissions for graduate studies. And so we're trying to encourage academic units and individual faculty to think holistically about the attributes and qualities that a student brings to the academy. We know that members of a number of demographic groups have been systemically and historically marginalized and excluded from having access to higher education and from having access to graduate studies specifically. And we know that the demographics of both our faculty and our grad student populations right now are shaped by those exclusionary forces. And there are cultural ramifications of that that continue to be exclusionary. So where, for example, a student who's coming from a different perspective or background or identity group than the majority who are already there there can be an impression that that person doesn't quite fit with what the department normally does. In addition, we know that because of a bunch of historical and institutional forces, students from a number of marginalized groups have not had access to the same opportunities as white students have tended to have access to. So Black, US-based students, Indigenous students, Latino, and Latinx students have tended not to have access to the same opportunities as white students. And for that reason, their applications may give the impression, if we're just looking at the numbers, that they do not have the same level of academic potential as white students on average. And that can include coming from a more prestigious undergraduate institution, that can include GPA, it can certainly include GRE scores. And very often, those things are not actually good indicators of a person's academic potential. So we are trying to support academic units in shifting how they are evaluating students to recognize that a student whose GRE scores aren't as high may have just as much or more academic potential as another student. It's just that they have not had the opportunities that promoted having the highest GRE score. And they may have other attributes, including personal resilience, having overcome a lot of obstacles, as well as having perspectives that are not already represented well in the discipline that make them incredibly good candidates for graduate study. And so we're trying to support academic units in shifting how they're thinking about graduate admissions to make that more inclusive. With that, I will turn things over to Liz.
Okay, I'm going to trust everyone can see me because I don't see anyone. I just see slides. So yes, so I'm Liz Carr. I joined the grad college at the beginning of July as Associate Dean. Before that, I was the long-term graduate liaison in microbiology and plant biology and have worked very closely with the grad college for several years. So I wanted to start out talking a little bit about graduate recruitment because there are different models at different levels. And As you start this new venture of faculty life, at some point you're going to be bringing in graduate students into your scholarly activity, your research, and your program may have different ways for recruiting students and admitting students. And so these are just some suggestions that I had for different ways that you can recruit students. So at the university and the department level, we have a grad college recruitment weekend, and this is done in conjunction with the departments. And there's some support for this. And so this is where we bring in graduate students or potential students that have applied to our programs, and we bring them in and have them interact with faculty, students, different things that are going on campus on that day as well. So if your department doesn't participate in that, talk to your leadership about the potential for that. Social media for department level programs is a good place to start if your department doesn't have any social media platforms. That's a good way to try to bring interest to your department. You can develop close relationships with smaller institutions, whether they're in Oklahoma or in other states. It's just a good way to build relationships with the institutions that may not have graduate programs available. And so those students will be looking to explore graduate degrees at other institutions. So just be sure to engage in conversation with your leadership in your departments, your grad liaison, your chairs or directors, and discuss some of the things that they're doing for recruitment at that level. There's also a lot of things that you can do at your level. And I've used a lot of these with success over the past years. And I think the most effective one is to use your professional network, all right? Talk with people at meetings. If they have great undergraduates that are looking for a home for graduate school, your grad school mates that may have their own labs or scholarly programs at other institutions, just use that. Collaborators, it's a great way to kind of find students that would have interest in your work. There are a couple of programs at OU. These are undergraduate programs, but they are great opportunities to get an undergraduate involved in your scholarly activity and potentially recruit them to the graduate program. So one of those is the LSAMP program, which is for minority and underrepresented groups in STEM fields. There is the FIRE program, which is the 4-year research experience. It is run by Rama Kathapali in biochemistry and chemistry, but there are students participating in this program all over campus. And you can sign up to host a FIRE student in your group or amongst your research group. So these are really high quality students that are potentially looking for graduate college experience. Honors research, that's another one. All of honors students at OU must complete an honors research project. And so you can connect with the honors college and recruit these students to work with you during their undergraduate times and potentially have them join your group. Other is to connect with students in your undergraduate courses if you're teaching upper division, but you can even start earlier on getting them involved in some of your scholarly activities if they're interested and potentially they will stay along for graduate school. You can develop your own group social medias. So your department might have one, but you might have one where you're highlighting successes, social interactions, all of those things that are happening in your circle of graduate students, postdocs, whatever your scholarly activity sort of looks like. And then again, you can target smaller institutions around Oklahoma and Texas and get yourself invited to give a talk there and talk a little bit about your work. And you might get some interest from students that are thinking about graduate school. So those are really just some of the different ways you can look at recruiting graduate students. But again, talk with leadership in your department to figure out what their process is for recruiting and admitting at students and go from there. So As Rodney mentioned, we do have professional development for both postdocs and graduate students, and we are moving towards a more formal recognition of our work with postdocs. And something that we have coming up in 2 weeks is National Postdoc Appreciation Week. And if you do have a postdoc as part of your group or your scholarly activity, there is an OU Postdoc Association as well that your postdoc could get involved in. And there are different leadership opportunities there and opportunities to work with the new Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. So Rodney covered this, so I will skip over. They're doing a lot of different activities, some great stuff going on. So encourage your students to take part in these development opportunities. All right. So the next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is PhD students and falling out of the pipeline and how we can support them to finish their degrees, because this is a major concern. And we as mentors have a responsibility to try to mentor them through that path to completion. And so if you look at the number of PhDs that OU confers every year, it's quite a bit lower than AAU Publics. This is particularly amongst the STEM fields, but we'd really like to make sure more of our entering PhD students make it through to degree completion. And really the key to that is strong mentorship and professional development. So we just wanted to talk a little bit about mentorship and best practices in terms of helping your students and allowing them to become successful and independent in that process. And one of the key things is communication, that you're having regular communication with your graduate students or postdocs, you're giving them constructive feedback, you're working with them on annual evaluations, which would likely and ideally involve their entire committee. And then sharing and making sure your expectations are explicit, what you should expect of the student and what the student should expect of you. And so it's not uncommon for some faculty to have a document that they share with students that are interested in working with them that talks about what they expect out of a graduate student. And ideally it should outline what they should expect out of you as well. Then the next thing is respect, treating them more like your junior colleagues, providing support, coaching them. Even when they're struggling, you can coach in a positive way to keep their momentum up without sort of breaking down their confidence. All right. Another great tool is individual development plans. These are, I think, pretty regular and seen in the STEM fields, but they apply across all fields. But really, it's just a yearly plan that's a living document that's talking about, this is what my career or academic goals are. This is what I'd like to do in the next year to meet those goals, as well as this is what I've done in the past year to meet those goals. And just working through that, revising it as the student works through their program. And also realize you're just one person and we all have challenges. So don't be afraid to develop a support network for you in mentoring your senior colleagues within your department and other departments to, if you're having a particular issue with a student or you're struggling getting them to be motivated, talk to your peers, see the types of things that they've done to help motivate students and overcome some of the challenges. They've all been there, done it. You can also enlist the committee. Sometimes the student advisor relationship can get a little tricky towards the end, and 3 or 5 is more effective than one person when we're trying to get them to think about something in a different way. We want to be inclusive in our mentoring, using inclusive language, particularly if you're working in a group setting, in a group meeting, and you're kind of giving feedback to a student. I think that that's important. Being able to put yourself in the student or postdoc shoes and how they might be receiving information or how certain things might be making them feel. Listening. I think this is a huge component because sometimes we all know that there are various points in graduate school where you get quite frustrated. And just having someone to listen to you and allow you to vent and talk about those frustrations. So just being present, giving them the time to talk to you about what they're struggling with, where they're progressing, and just having those conversations, being engaged, and critically reflecting on conversations that you've had when the student leaves your office and you're like, well, I don't know if I really got my point across, or I didn't think I'd handle that in the best way. Just taking note of those and then going back and saying, this is how I would do it differently next time. Part of the mentorship, again, as I had mentioned earlier, is the role of annual evaluations. These are required by the grad college, and they can look very different depending upon discipline, the nature of the graduate program. So there's no one size fits all that's going to work for every program or discipline. And so it's all about working with your unit to make sure that you have a process that allows you to give written feedback to a graduate student every year on where they're doing great, where some improvements can be needed. And this is also, having this, I think, is great in terms of retention, increasing time to degree, but also in highlighting some of the positive things that they've done. And when we put out calls for different awards, you'd say, hey, I noticed the student in their annual evaluation did this great thing. And so it's kind of easy to identify those really great students that warrant some recognition for their excellence. And again, many programs involve the committee in that annual evaluation process because the committee is sort of there at the key stages of the general exam for doctoral students and the defense. And it's really just good to have them engaged in the conversation about the student and the student's work throughout their degree program. And with that, I would say you are one person. You have a lot of hats that you're wearing, and you cannot necessarily have expertise in every area that a student might need mentoring on. So we're moving outside of their direct scholarly activity here, but they're at a very challenging time in their lives. There's a lot going on personally, and then they've got all of these activities with graduate school and the demands of that, and in some cases, external employment as well. So I like to encourage my students to take on a mentoring ecosystem, basically, or multi-level mentoring, where they have different mentors for different things. And you wouldn't want to discourage this, but it can be quite helpful to you. So, you know, you would be their primary disciplinary mentor, but they might have past advisors from an undergraduate program or a master's program that they still communicate with and give them some advice. They will need disciplinary, institutional, cultural, and lifestyle mentorings or needs that can come from senior peers, cohort peers, or faculty and staff that aren't necessarily on their graduate committees. So they may just be talking to them about different things. I think, you know, graduate students, they're getting married, they're having kids. And so talking to someone else that has managed this or managed those life changes during graduate school and their experiences with it, I think can be very valuable. In terms of degree milestones and academic challenges, they can engage the graduate liaison for the specifics on paperwork, and the administrators with their academic counselors, just to check in and make sure that they're getting the right information about what they need to do and when. Sherry and I think Rodney had also mentioned academic coaching. This is an option, and it works really well to get students to completion when they're kind of struggling, getting over those last few hurdles. And they also may have disciplinary professionals that could serve as mentors that are outside of the academy, right? So maybe they're interested in industry. So they may need to develop some connections and networking there, and mentors in terms of preparation and soft skill development for industry rather than academia. All right, so in terms of resources for mentoring, if you are having problems with a student, you can come and have a confidential consultation with Sherry or I, and Rodney also works with coaching and students. Or you can recommend that the student come and talk to us, or if you hear of a student that's really struggling in an advisor mentee relationship, then you could, you can direct them to us. We can, help with mentoring support and academic coaching for students that need that. We can provide guidance for you and review any graduate student or postdoc employment offers so that you make sure you're covering all the bases and putting together a proper letter. So feel free to reach out often and early, particularly when it comes to students that are struggling or facing a particular challenge. And I think this is the last primary slide, and this is a very important issue, and that's graduate student mental health and support. So I wanted to provide you guys with some links. So Megan has the slides in PDF format with all of the active links that she's going to provide to you. Hang on to that as a resource. But when it comes to graduate student mental health, we can only do so much as we're not professionally trained to handle those situations. But if you fear that a graduate student is struggling, there are a number of different ways you can go about that. There's the Behavior Intervention Team, or BIT, OU Advocates. I hope and I think you guys are already learning about some of these, or will be throughout this new faculty series. There's some trainings that are great for faculty, the Ally training, Green Zone training for working with veterans. And we know that campus peer support groups for students are really key to their happiness and their progress in their degree programs. And so this is just a list of some peer groups on campus that are very active, that you could, hang on to that resource so that you can provide that to students as you see fit. And with that, I can take any questions, or all of us can take questions if you have them. And at the end, you'll have all of our contact information again. So like I said, reach out early and often.
Thank you, Liz and Sherry and Randy. Yes, if anybody has questions, either just unmute yourself and shout them out, or put them in the text, either one.
This is really helpful. Thank you so much.
Maybe a COVID times question, like, what can we expect if we send a graduate student to the graduate college? Should they actually go to the graduate college? Should they email first? Should they call? Like, what's kind of the mode of operation for the graduate college this semester?
They should email first.
Okay.
There is some staffing on a minimal basis, but they should reach out to one of us and set up a time to meet virtually.
Okay, thanks.
And for the day-to-day stuff, it's I think it's a good idea to get to know who your graduate counselor is for your unit, because they're really the point person for a lot of the day-to-day types of things you deal with. Or if it's on the admissions side, we also have one of the admissions counselors is appointed to each unit. So get to know who those are. Those are good points of contact. And then for kind of the issues that come up, you're dealing with a student situation you're trying to address, or faculty to faculty relationship, things that are impacting graduate education, stuff like that, then you need to reach out to Sherry, Liz, or myself on those kinds of things.
I will say, as a faculty member who's been here for 13 years, I really appreciate the graduate college's proactiveness in getting lots of the forms that we need filled out into fillable PDFs and really making that transition. For those of you who are new faculty, you may have to be really patient with some of the faculty who have been here for a while. That they're not used to that. This is a new thing for OU. So you might have to be patient with your colleagues who have been here a little bit longer. So.
And I will say we are trying hard to get our systems moved electronically and to streamline some things. And I know a number of years ago, sort of the knock that I and other faculty would give to the graduate college is it's the place where paperwork goes to die. But you know, really, we're here to serve you and students, and we're trying to make that experience as supportive and helpful as possible. So please do let us know if there are things you see that we can improve on, or things you'd like to see us do.
I have a quick question. Thank you so much for all the presentation and the information, very helpful. I was wondering about the, if you have a quick number of the percentage of students that fall out of the pipeline, the grad school pipeline, along the process here, and is it often, or you know, how often is it, and that students get struggle during the grad school or grad study?
If you, you can actually, we've been working on getting some of this data out to both students and departments, so you can get a sense of what this is for your own programs. So if you go to the Graduate College website, there is a graduate student dashboard that has admissions information. It has time to degree information. We're about to post degree completion numbers there as well. And that'll give you a really good sense of how things are going in your own field or university as a whole. I think nationally, and this is certainly true at OU as well, we do struggle a bit with degree completion, particularly at the doctoral level. I think our rate, I haven't looked at this in the last few weeks, but I think we're on the order of 60 to 65% doctoral degree completion. If you think about that, that's then, you know, 30 to 40% of our students who come in, they are interested in pursuing the degree at an advanced, you know, pursuing the study of this subject at an advanced level. They're highly motivated, they're interested. To have that many students fail to complete the degree really is a very troubling thing. And there are certainly other institutions, particularly in the AAU, for example, that do better at this. So the doctoral degree completion rate for the average public AAU school is about 75%. So anyway, so to answer your question, you can look there to get a sense of how your program is doing. You can also look at this by demographics. So are men and women doing differently in your program? How are different underrepresented groups doing in your program? Aside from that, we're also working, and Sherry can speak a little bit more to this, on getting ready to do climate surveys in different units and try to understand some of the factors better that may be influencing these numbers. Mm-hmm. I think our sense is really the attrition in a lot of our programs, and again, this is very much true nationally, is we have, to a large sense, kind of a sink or swim culture many times in graduate programs, rather than thinking of these folks as junior colleagues that we want to support their success. You know, if you're a new faculty member, you come in, you hopefully have assigned mentors and folks that you can go to in the department. You get annual reviews. Those are very much in depth, particularly if you're working towards tenure. You'll get a progress toward tenure letter. We really need to be thinking about graduate students in the same way and thinking about how do we support them? How do we give them individualized support towards their success? So I don't know if I answered all of your question. I forget some of the pieces you asked, but hopefully I've addressed some of it.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much. Yeah, skimming through one slide of Liz, and I saw that when she tried to compare the average number of students graduating from OU versus AAU, I could quickly compare between the other areas of STEM versus chemical engineering. While civil engineering, they had like a couple, on average, 30 students graduating each year. But for chemical engineering, we just had 9. And I'm from chemical engineering, so that's why I was wondering if the incoming stream of students was not high for chemical engineering, or if the number of students falling out of the pipeline was high. So
Yeah, and I don't know the specific answer to you for chemical engineering. You can look at the dashboard to see how many students are applying, and how many of those who do apply are admitted and enrolled. I do think in STEM in particular, one of the factors we're looking at is not just the culture that we have, but also the amount of financial support that we have available for graduate students. In a lot of STEM fields, it's very much dependent on assistantships. Some of that I think needs to, that's work that we're doing at the university level to provide additional funding for university funded assistantships, things like that. But also really, I think this is a function of the level of research activity that we have. And we need to do a better job of building extramurally funded support that we have, particularly in engineering and some of the other STEM fields, to help support students and postdocs. So I think that's a big piece of just what where our numbers are in terms of numbers of doctoral students in particular graduated.
I see. Thank you so much. I do have another question for Sherry. I don't see Sherry here. Maybe she left. But quickly speaking, she mentioned that we should go beyond GPA and GRE scores. So I was wondering about the other methods that you assess the quality of students, the incoming students, you know, for those categories.
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, Sherry had another back-to-back event, and so she needed to step out. We really encourage folks to think about what characterizes a successful student. What are the characteristics of someone who performs well in a graduate program? And that's typically not, things like GPA and GRE score, things like that, are not very good predictors. If you look at the numbers, if you compare student success and those things,
yes,
what
I
you really
totally
try.
agree with you.
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry for interrupting. I totally agree with that. I was just wondering about, you know, other methods or advice for us as the faculty to assess the quality of students in that sense.
So I think what you're trying to assess is their level of motivation, their level of interest in the subject. You're looking at other things that, you know, have they had opportunities to do, and have they been able to do any kind of studies as an undergraduate, or have they been engaged in things as an undergraduate that show that kind of interest and demonstrate that passion for the subject. Some of this, I think, is looking at that paper record, but some of it is interviewing the student, bringing them to campus, engaging with them in a recruitment weekend. Those are the kinds of things, and then talking a little bit more with their professional references. But even there, you have to keep in mind that a student that's coming from a less strong institution may not have references that are quite as adept at playing the game of graduate admissions. And so I think a lot of it is just the face-to-face, the interactions that you have with the student, and understanding what motivates them and why they want to go to graduate school and what they want to accomplish. Can tell you as much as many of these other things.
I would also add that resilience, any indicators of resilience in their personal statements or in their interviews is a good thing, that they've been able to endure challenging things and find ways to navigate through those, because that's very much, you know, part of what graduate school is. It's going to be challenging. There are going to be hurdles, and if they, you know, can persevere, then that's also a good indicator of success.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Thank you so much.
I have a question. This is Wei Chen. My question is, what's the trend of our own undergraduate students move up to our graduate students? And what's the effort we have been putting there to recruit our own?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't off the top of my head know, and I guess we'll have to follow up and take a look at that. You know, how many of our undergraduates move on to graduate programs here? In terms of how to facilitate that, I think a lot of it starts with student undergraduate research experiences and scholarship and creative activity experiences with faculty. So any programs that your unit and you do individually with students can help with that. A lot of institutions, we don't do that much yet here at OU, but a lot of institutions do summer research experiences as well. And that can be both for students from the institution as well as other places to get them exposed to that particular department, the faculty of that unit, faculty of that program, get them excited about it. We're trying to build up, we've got the LSAMP program on campus, and that is funding for students largely in underrepresented groups to do undergraduate research, but it's intended for students who are thinking about graduate school as well. And so that can be a good pipeline for students to move in. So I think it's all of the above strategy there. I don't have the numbers for you, but all of those are good strategies. And some of those students will go to other institutions, but some will stay here. So the more you really promote undergraduate research and scholarship and get them engaged with the life of the graduate program, the better.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen. I actually have a question for you. It's not typically related to graduate students, but I know we had an effort called OU Create for graduate students and faculty to create their own academic website. And I don't know if you know anything about that. I have a technical question that I need to ask. I reached out to the email address listed on the website, but I haven't heard anything. And I called OUIT, they directed me to CFE.
I tell you what, Sophie, why don't you send me an email and we'll see if we can get your question answered right away.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it might be a better time to go ahead and do that outside of this,
okay.
Or I'd be happy to give you a call if you'd like to do that as well.
Yeah, that would be great. I will send you an email first with
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah. So I want to go ahead and jump in if there's no more questions, and thank both Randy and our other speakers that have left. A quick reminder as well that our next seminar is going to be September 17th at 3 o'clock. I've included a link so you can go ahead and register for this one. It's going to be about inclusive learning and then learning spaces with Kevin Buck and IT. So thank you very much for attending. We appreciate everyone taking the time as well. We'll be posting all the resources and the recording on the Canvas course that we have.
Thank you so
Great.
much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.
Nice to meet
Thank
you.
Happy Friday.
Nice meeting you.
Bye.
Goodbye and happy Friday.